In bustling Atlanta, a millionaire pediatric neurosurgeon crosses paths with an 11-year-old homeless black girl who stuns him with her knowledge of the spine, right as he's fighting a losing battle to help his paralyzed son walk again. What begins as a chance encounter at a traffic light changes everything he thought he knew about healing and where brilliance hides. Atlanta moved like a living thing, buzzing, jostling, honking, rushing, the kind of city where your eyes only see what you expect. Street signs, stoplights, phones lighting up with texts, faces blurring into one another. Which is why Dr. Michael Grayson almost didn't see her. He was behind the wheel of his silver Tesla, inching toward the intersection near Peachtree and 9th, just 2 blocks from the state-of-the-art pediatric neuroclinic that bore his name, Grayson NeuroHealth. In the passenger seat, strapped into a modified chair, his 10-year-old son Luis stared silently out the window, fingers curled uselessly on his lap. The light turned red. That's when Michael saw the cardboard sign. It wasn't the sign that made him look twice. It was what was written on it. "I'm not begging. I'm learning. Ask me anything about the spine." The handwriting was neat. Block letters, below it, drawn with a level of precision that didn't match the tattered clothes or the threadbare backpack, was an anatomical sketch of the human spine, cervical to sacral, labeled perfectly. She stood barefoot on the concrete divider, wearing an oversized hoodie that swallowed her frame and sneakers 3 sizes too big. Her hair was braided, pulled back into a tight bun, and her face, black, lean, freckled, held a gaze that didn't ask for pity, just attention. Michael blinked. He almost smiled. "Interesting marketing," he muttered to himself. Luis didn't react. Then the girl turned. Their eyes met. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She stepped closer to his car, held the sign a little higher, and then said, clear as day, not pleading, not yelling, just certain, "Sir, I can help your son walk again." Michael let out a short laugh, half nerves, half discomfort. "I'm sorry?" he asked, rolling the window down halfway. "The C6-C7 connection is often underestimated," she said calmly, gesturing to the sketch with her finger. "Compression right there can impact coordination in the lower limbs, but it's hard to detect on initial scans." Her eyes dropped briefly to Luis, then back to Michael. "Has he been examined for microvascular displacement?" Michael's smile faltered. His heart started doing that annoying thing it did when something made too much sense too quickly. He opened his mouth, but the light turned green. Behind him, a horn blared. The girl took a step back and waved politely as he drove off. He didn't speak the rest of the ride. By the time they pulled into the garage beneath the clinic, Luis had drifted into sleep. Michael carried him inside, but the girl's voice stayed lodged in his head. The C6-C7 connection is often underestimated. At 9:45 a.m., after rounds, he pulled up Luis's spinal MRIs again, focused on the C6-C7 disc space. There it was, a faint irregularity, one he'd written off as inconsequential weeks ago. But now it didn't feel inconsequential. It felt like a door. He tapped a pen against the desk. Could it be coincidence? A lucky guess? Street kid memorizing phrases from a billboard? But those weren't buzzwords. That was targeted language. Clinical. Specific. Too specific. He asked his secretary to cancel his lunch. At 6 p.m., he returned to the same intersection. She wasn't there. The divider was empty. The sign gone. The sidewalk littered with the same paper cups and gum wrappers and glances that avoided eye contact. Michael stood by the pole where she'd stood and pulled a pen from his pocket. tore the corner off a prescription pad, and wrote, "Eliza, come back. Same time tomorrow. I believe you." He folded it in half and tucked it under a zip tie at the base of the light post. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not just because of the girl, but because of what it might mean if she was right. If the only person who'd noticed something real about Luisha's condition wasn't a specialist, or a surgeon, or a technician, but a kid with a cardboard sign. The next morning, he took a detour before work. At 7:43 a.m., she was there. Same hoodie, same beat-up sneakers, same sign, now tucked inside her backpack. She was sitting on the curb, nose deep in a torn paperback. He pulled over, rolled down the window. "I'm here," he said. She looked up, smiled a little. "I saw your note," she said. "What's your name?" "Eliza." "That's a nice name." "I didn't choose it," she replied, deadpan. Then added, "My mom was a nurse. She named me after the scientist in Pygmalion. She liked names with meaning." Michael got out of the car. He crouched next to her. "You said you could help my son." "I want to try," she said. "But I'm not a miracle. I'm just someone who reads medical textbooks from the donation bins behind the library." He looked down at her hands. Calloused fingers. Under the dirt, pen marks stained her nails. "How long have you been on your own?" Eliza shrugged. "Since the shelter closed. Before that, we had a car. Before that, a real apartment. But I always had books." "Why the spine?" he asked. "Because everything comes from it," she said, as if it were obvious. "Every signal, every possibility." Michael stared at her. There was no guile in her face, no manipulation, just certainty. "Come with me," he said. She hesitated. "Where?" "My clinic." Her eyes narrowed. "People don't usually invite me into clinics. They call security." "I'm not people," he said. Eliza stood up, adjusted her backpack. "Okay, but if anyone tries to call me names, I'm leaving." He nodded. "Fair." As they walked to his car, he opened the door for her. She hesitated again. "No one lets people like me in their cars either," she murmured. He said nothing, just waited. She got in. The ride to the clinic was silent, but something shifted, not in the city, not in the traffic, but in him. And maybe, just maybe, in her. They stepped into the glass lobby of Grayson NeuroHealth at 8:17 a.m., and the world slowed down. Eliza's sneakers squeaked once on the marble. Heads turned. Staff in fitted scrubs and polished loafers stared as if a stranger had wandered onto a movie set. Because in their eyes, that's exactly what she was. "Dr. Grayson," one nurse whispered, glancing at Eliza's hoodie, her fraying backpack, the faint dust on her jeans. "Is everything okay?" He nodded curtly. "She's with me." The words echoed. "With me." 3 syllables that hung in the air long enough to spark tension in the silence. A junior doctor paused by the elevator, mouthing something to another. Eliza caught it. "Did he just say, 'Is she lost?'" she murmured to Michael. He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward a waiting room usually reserved for VIPs and out-of-town specialists. She followed him inside, took in the modern chairs, the espresso machine, the polished wood table stacked with peer-reviewed journals. "This is fancy," she said, dropping into a chair, "like where people pretend they're not sick." He allowed himself a smile. "I want you to meet my son," he said. "You said you could help. Now's your chance." Eliza's face changed. She nodded. "Let's go." They rolled Luis in 10 minutes later. He was quiet as always, mouth slightly parted, eyes focused just past Eliza's shoulder. Michael sat beside him, his posture suddenly vulnerable. Not the way a surgeon sits, but the way a father does, when hope has been bruised too many times. "This is Eliza," he said to Luis. "She's smart. Smarter than she should be. She's going to take a look." Luis didn't move, but his fingers twitched just a little. Eliza crouched beside him. "Hey," she said softly. "I'm Eliza. I'm 11. I'm not a doctor, but I know the spine. I know where it talks and where it shuts down. And I think yours is trying to talk again." She reached slowly toward his ankle. "Can I touch you?" Luis blinked, then nodded. She pressed gently, then tapped along the sole of his foot, her fingers tracing pressure points like she'd done it 100 times. "The C6, C7 region," she muttered. "If there's still residual nerve conductivity, we should look for response in isolated fibers. Even minimal twitching could indicate surviving axonal pathways." Michael blinked. "Where did you learn that language?" "From Spinal Neurotrauma by K. Tater, Volume 2. It was in a box labeled Free Water Damaged, behind an old bookstore." She looked up. "I read fast. Helps when it's cold." At that moment, Dr. Ian Malden, head of orthoneurosurgical diagnostics, entered the room. Clean-shaven, white coat pristine. He stopped short. "Michael, what is this?" "This is Eliza," Michael said evenly. "She's observing. She's a child. She's also the only one who mentioned vascular displacement at C6, C7 without even seeing a scan." Ian's face tightened. "This is highly irregular." Eliza stood. "So is waking up in an alley behind a library and memorizing spinal pathways by headlamp," she said calmly. "But here we are." He frowned. "This isn't her level." Eliza didn't flinch. "You don't have to be someone important to do something important." The room went still. Michael took a breath. "She's going to demonstrate a tactile coordination exercise, one that activates sensory reflexes along lower pathways. Just give her 10 minutes. Ian raised his hands. "Your license, your clinic, but I want no part of this." He left. Eliza turned back to Luis. She opened her backpack and pulled out a sock filled with dry rice. "It's crude," she said, "but the weight and texture can stimulate the tibial nerve when applied rhythmically." She moved his foot gently, tapping in a pattern. Pause, tap, stretch, repeat. Luis's brow twitched. She spoke softly, like a lullaby of anatomy. "You don't have to move everything, just one thing. That's enough to start." The clock ticked. 6 minutes in, she adjusted the angle of his toes. At minute 11, Luis's big toe flickered, barely but undeniably. Michael leaned forward. "Luis, did you feel that?" Luis looked down. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye. Then, his toe twitched again. Michael exhaled like he hadn't breathed in months. "Do it again." Eliza smiled. "I didn't do it. He did." The silence that followed felt louder than applause. By noon, half the building had heard the story. By 2 p.m., someone had emailed security, citing unauthorized access. And by 4 Michael received a formal notice from the hospital board. Subject line: Non-credentialed personnel in patient care zones. Urgent. He printed it, folded it in half, and placed it in a drawer. That evening, Eliza waited for him at the curb outside the clinic, same as that morning. She looked smaller somehow. Not scared, just bracing. They want me gone, don't they? She asked before he could speak. He nodded. Some of them. Because I don't have a badge. No, he said. Because you made them look at something they ignored. She didn't reply. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a sealed envelope. What is it? A letter to the board, he said. Public. I'm sending it out tomorrow. She opened it. It read, "To whom it may concern. If your issue is with a child knowing more about the spine than half the residents here, that's a training problem. If your issue is that she doesn't have a degree, I remind you, neither did Da Vinci. If you wish to remove someone, remove me. But know this, I will not apologize for recognizing brilliance where others saw poverty. She is not a liability. She is the very future you claim to prepare for." Dr. Michael Grayson Eliza read it twice, then folded it carefully and handed it back. You really wrote that? I did. You're crazy, she said. Maybe. She stared at the building behind him. Even if they let me back in, I don't belong there. You do, he said. You always did. They just didn't see you. She looked down. I don't want money. I don't want fame. I just want a room, a lamp, and books that don't smell like mold. Michael smiled gently. That can be arranged. Eliza tilted her head. Why are you doing this? He looked at her, and for the first time in days, he didn't feel like a doctor trying to fix something broken. He felt like a human being who had finally decided to see. Because you helped my son, he said, and because you reminded me of something I forgot. What? That genius doesn't always wear a white coat. The story broke quietly. A local journalist caught wind of it from a nurse who refused to stay silent. Within 2 days, the headline graced every screen in Atlanta's medical community. 11-year-old homeless girl helps renowned neurosurgeon's son take first steps. By the end of the week, it was national. Photos circulated. Grainy ones of Eliza on the sidewalk, clutching her anatomy sketch, standing beside Dr. Michael Grayson in front of the clinic. In each one, her face looked the same. Calm, composed, a little wary. The comment sections lit up. Where did she learn that? She should be at MIT. How many more kids like her are out there, unseen? Donation pages sprang up in her name. Thousands of dollars, offers of shelter, interviews, sponsorships, scholarships. Eliza asked for none of it. I don't want money, she told Michael plainly, sitting on his back porch with a cup of cocoa and a borrowed sweatshirt. I want books, a room with a lamp, maybe a window. He looked at her and saw someone too young to be that grounded and far too old to believe in miracles. She still didn't trust compliments. When a reporter called her a medical prodigy, she corrected them. I'm just someone who paid attention. The hospital board had no choice but to respond. And for once, bureaucracy bent to brilliance. A new pilot program launched within the month. They called it Observation Access, a temporary initiative for children from underserved communities to audit classes, shadow specialists, and sit in on clinical lectures. No grades, no forms, just the chance to learn. Eliza was the first name on the roster. She wasn't the only one for long. Kids from shelters, from foster care, from temporary addresses and quiet corners. They came in one by one, each one wide-eyed, nervous, curious. Eliza greeted every single one. But she never acted like a mentor. She acted like what she was, a peer. Michael, in the meantime, did what few in his position had ever done. He let go of control. He brought Eliza home. He offered the guest room. She stared at it like it was a museum exhibit. "This is for me?" "Yes. No one lets people like me in their houses." He knelt down to her level. "Luis wants you here," he said. "So do I." She hesitated. It was Luis who finally convinced her. The boy who hadn't spoken in full sentences in 2 months looked her in the eye and said, "Please don't go." She stayed. They fell into rhythm. She spent mornings at the hospital, afternoons with Luis, evenings reading under a yellow desk lamp in the room she still wouldn't call her own. At night, she asked questions about cases, about anatomy, about why some things in medicine were always assumed but never questioned. Michael answered every single one, and sometimes she corrected him. Gently, always with evidence. They became a family, not in the way of photo frames and last names, but in the way some people become essential without permission. 3 weeks in, it happened. Luis stood up. Not for long, not far, but enough. Enough that his mother, watching on FaceTime from another city, dropped the phone and wept into her hands. It wasn't a miracle. It was the culmination of tiny details, long hours, new protocols, and a girl who saw what no one else had. The news outlets called it a miracle anyway. Michael corrected them at the next medical conference. "She's not a miracle," he said, standing at the podium, voice clear. "She's a mind we almost missed." The room went silent. Then came the applause. The impact rippled. At a school for gifted youth in downtown Atlanta, a new classroom opened. The walls weren't pristine. The chairs didn't match. But above the door, in clean black lettering, was a plaque. Eliza's room. Below it, for students with no address, no paperwork, but infinite potential. Eliza visited only once. She stood in the doorway, hands in her pockets, staring at the words. She didn't say much. She just smiled. Then turned to the administrator beside her and asked, "Can we get more books?" By spring, her world had changed. She had a legal guardian in Dr. Grayson, her own library card, a student ID, a new backpack with a laminated badge inside. Not for show, but for access. And taped to the outside of it, in her own handwriting, a new sign. "I'm not asking for help. I'm offering it." The final scene wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a headline. It was Eliza walking into her new school for the first time. Her hoodie was clean, her shoes fit, and the backpack rested squarely against her spine. As she stepped through the doors, a boy in the hallway whispered, "That's her." A girl nodded reverently. The spine girl. Eliza kept walking, not because she was trying to prove anything, but because finally she had somewhere to go, and this time they were expecting her.